A few weeks ago, one of our residents came to me and said, I'm really struggling with my personal inventory. I'm trying to take a look at myself, put together a plan, figure out what it would take for me to get better. But every time I work on that, I just want to drink. This particular person, as I was talking to him, I began to perceive that he was more of a perfectionist, performance type of a person. So every time he would begin to do that inventory, he would put more pressure on himself. I tend to call that approach to life self-hatred, in a place where I'm examining myself and I'm hard on myself. When I come down like that with a critical spirit towards myself, a critical spirit is a critical spirit. We are eternal beings. We are spiritual beings. When my spirit is in that place, it invites energizing. It invites connecting with the demonic realm. So now I'm not just fighting my own perfectionism. Now it's being supercharged. It's being energized by the demonic in a way that good luck overcoming that. Good luck being able to get better. So my advice to that person, put the list down. It was interesting. A few days later, he came back to me and he said, I no longer want to drink. I have a peace. I'm doing better. Now, there are certainly people who need that list. Those are the people who are more on the other side of the spectrum, where they're in a pride zone. They're doing comparisons. They're doing judgments. They're doing many other kinds of things. And they need to step back and take a better look at themselves. They need that personal inventory. But there is not a one-size-fits-all that's going to work in this area of reconciliation and restoration. There are times when we need to fully examine ourselves, and there's times when we need to step back and take a different approach. In fact, whether you're on what I would call the pride side, which is the comparisons and the judgments and all of those things, or whether you're on more the self-hatred side, which is more self-performance, perfectionism, trying to discipline myself into a better place, it really doesn't matter which end of that spectrum you're on. I believe that there is a better way. And that better way is actually found in 1 Corinthians 4:4. Where Paul talks about, I don't know of anything against myself, but that really doesn't put me in a right standing with God. What puts me in a right standing with God is I take my things and I offer them up to God and I wait and I listen for Him to judge me. That's actually the approach that I strongly suggest for people, is that instead of trying to develop your own personal inventory, we understand that we're pretty much blind to ourselves. And the best thing I can do is start right there where I understand that I don't understand. And I begin to open up the Bible. I begin to study. I begin to see what the scriptures have to say. And I look at my life and I compare to what's going on there. And then I step back from that and I get into a waiting and a listening posture before God. The power of the Holy Spirit to convict me and to guide me in a direction, I believe that that's the best way to move towards making a personal inventory. I love Paul's attitude coming out of 1 Corinthians 4:4, where he pretty much says, I really don't know anything. Contrast that with how we frequently do that personal inventory where I'm going to look really hard, study really hard, and I'm going to get this thing figured out. Add to that a concept from Romans 14:4, where it talks about, who are you to judge another servant? Now, we might not think that applies because, of course, I'm supposed to judge me, but that's actually not true. You are bought at a price. You are not your own. If you've given your life to the Lord Jesus Christ, your life actually belongs to Him. You are now His servant. So when you begin to judge you, you're getting in between the master and the servant. And it's really important for you to back up and begin to realize, wow, God may ask things of me that are far beyond what I could have ever imagined. Or in some cases, it swings to the other end where it's like, I was being incredibly hard on me. But when I humbled myself and I just waited before God, God actually came alongside and encouraged me. I find that to be true. that so often the voice of God is actually almost in the complete opposite of where I would logically land in this personal inventory process. When I learn to wait, listen, get into humility, that attracts the presence of God, that attracts the voice of God. Now I have a starting point for doing that personal inventory. I'm breaking just a little bit early, but I want you to think about your style for a little bit. Are you that person that just pounds on yourself? Are you the person who looks around and compares to other people and tries to justify your actions? Most people tend to swing to one end or the other, or there are a few of us that swing to one end and the other all in the same breath. I'm going to suggest that if you step back, you begin to wait and you listen and you allow God to guide you, you'll actually end up in a better place than if you approach it according to what's instinctive to you. When we follow our own instincts, it tends to stink. It tends to get us into a bad place. Take a few moments and review what you normally do so that you can get some ideas of this is my normal. I may want to change that normal if I want a better outcome, and then we'll be back and we'll talk you through the process of this is what it looks like in a healthy way to do a personal inventory. This video is entitled What? And the what generally in recovery and reconciliation we think of as a transaction. What words do I need to speak to you? What do I need to own? How can I repent? How can we do restitution? What can we do to make this entire thing right? Or if you want a real toxic word, what can we do to fix it? As soon as we go into fix it, it automatically goes into manipulation, it goes into control, it goes into all kinds of other things. One of the first things for you to think about is I have no power over you. You have no power over me. In fact, if you really want to get to the nitty-gritty, I don't even have power over me. I have a sin nature that rises up, and especially once it rises up, the demonic realm captures that and energizes that, and I'm not able to rule over that unless God is showing up and He's helping me. That perspective of humility is really first and foremost, and we need to get a hold of that. As we're taking a look at an inventory and we're trying to figure out what is it that we need to do, what is it that we need to say, where do I go with this thing? One of the things is to step back, get into that listening phase, which we talked about in the last segment, but also let's start with the wrong things. In this section, I'm going to be talking about what I would call wrong judgment, wrong steps that will almost certainly derail the process. To introduce this concept, I'm going to use a word that's not in vogue, and that's that word judgment. As a culture, we've taken that and we've thrown it out. You can't judge. You should never judge. I'm going to tell you that you can't really even get out of bed in the morning without starting to make judgments. When should I get up? What should I do? What should I eat? What should I wear? All of those require judgments. Now, I understand our culture is talking about condemn. Thou shalt not condemn others. Thou shalt not judge others. But most people don't even know this next verse is in the Bible, John 7:24, where Jesus tells us don't judge by appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. If we're not judging with righteous judgment, everything begins to fall apart. In order to do this reconciliation process, you're going to have to learn right judgment from wrong judgment. You're going to have to see truth. You're going to have to see different shades, different perceptions. There's a lot of work to be done. As I started talking about in the last segment, and I didn't give it this name, one of the first things that you're going to struggle with is what I call ego swing. You're going to start, first of all, clear over here, maybe on the pride perspective, where I'm in comparisons, I'm making excuses, I'm going through all kinds of things. It's like, I'm okay, and how dare you say I'm not okay? And then you'll swing all the way over into the self-hatred zone, Where over here it's like, oh, I'm a loser, and if I could just get it together, and if I could just work on me, everything would work out right. And so I'm getting ready to do my inventory. It doesn't matter which end of that spectrum you're on, it's not going to work well. That's why I propose to you, get into that listening zone. With ego swing, people almost never stop in the middle. They swing from one end to the other end, back to the other end, and it's back and forth, and that pendulum never stops in the center. In fact, what really needs to happen is it's not even about stopping in the center. It's like getting onto a completely different plane. When I begin to understand that it's not about me doing better or worse, but about me humbling myself before God and walking out what He wants, it's just a completely different way of thinking and approaching the situation. Many times I would be in a place where I'd be thinking, well, I've done enough. Surely I've done enough. Wrong question. At some point, I get back to the place of, what's the will of God? Oh, He wants more? Okay, I guess I'll take those steps and see where it goes. There's other times with people who are more on what I would call the self-hatred end, or maybe they're the self-sacrificers that literally give themselves through their sacrifice into an abusive relationship. Some of those people need to be over here on the other end of, this isn't healthy for me. I need to stop. I need to walk away. If you're hearing what I'm talking about, it's on a completely different plane. It's a completely different approach. And if you're in ego swing, I'll virtually guarantee you, you're not walking in right judgment. Even the very idea of a personal inventory almost automatically leads you into the idea of what I call self-righteous judgment. When we start thinking about doing a personal inventory, it's like, I did this, I said that, you did this, you said that. And all of a sudden, I'm beginning to map out all of these things, and I almost instantly go into the place of judgment. Even after having done that, it's really easy when I'm going to another person to use a lot of I language in a way that's not, I did this, I'm guilty, I'm responsible. But there's a lot of comparison language going on back and forth. And as soon as I get into those comparisons, as soon as I start playing judge, and I'm starting to use language that really sets that up, I've set myself up in a self-righteous, I'm the judge. The only one that you can judge is you, and then you can only judge you rightly if you go back to the first part of this, which is I get into that place of listening. I get into that place of waiting. I allow God to speak. When God speaks, it touches our heart, and it's a very different thing. All of us are eternal beings. So if somebody comes to you with a lot of eyes and they've been using their brain to think through their things, you're going to hear that heart. You're going to hear that tone. And you're instinctively going to look at that and go, for some reason, I don't trust it. The words are right, but something just doesn't feel right. If instead of a self-righteous judgment, I've actually done that listening thing before God and I've waited and there's a humility, there's a completely different tone that will come through you. Guard yourself against this error of self-righteous judgment. A third error in this area of self-judgment is the idea of only seeing the escalation. So often when we go to other people, we're taking them literally the tip of the iceberg. We go to them and say, well, I'm so sorry that I said these words to you. Or we might even just go to them and go, but I was really speaking truth. I'm sorry I said these words to you in this way. It was a really bad tone. Well, if you actually had a bad tone, there's something beneath the surface of that iceberg. There's an attitude on your part. There is some pride. There is some bitterness. There is some jealousy. If all you see is the tip of the iceberg, if all you repent for is what I call the escalation, the other person's going to see it. They're going to hear it. They're going to know it. So I'm going to the other person. I believe I'm doing what I need to do to make things right. And all of a sudden this thing blows up and I'm like, what are they expecting from me? I don't get it. This is ridiculous. That person's a tyrant. That person's an egotistical jerk. I don't know what's wrong with them. Well, let's go back to eternity in our hearts. First and foremost, we're spiritual beings. Unless or until you've seen the iceberg that's below the water, until you see at the very heart level, oh, I had insecurity down there. Out of that insecurity, then there was a control layer. Out of that control layer, there was again more anxiety and more fear. And so when I came to you, I was all uptight. I was pressing. I was using every manipulation technique that I knew. I was doing white lies. I was doing whatever it is that you're talking about. When you see your own heart, when you see the things at that deeper level, and you're actually willing to open up and to be honest of, I was actually jealous. And out of my jealousy, then these other kinds of things developed. Do you understand just how powerful that is when we get that transparent? But most of the time when we're doing a personal inventory, if we do it at a human level, it's like, oh, I'm sorry I punched you in the mouth. Oh, never mind the words that were spoken before that and all of the hard attitudes and everything else. All we see is the escalation. That's a mistake. A fourth mistake in this judgment area is when I believe I can fix things. I've already talked about that a little bit in a previous stage, but we have to understand the Philippians 4:13, which is not I can do all things. It's I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I don't know about you, but humbling myself is hard. Going to other people who don't like me or angry at me or have something against me, that's hard. And I don't do it well. I go uptight. I go frustrated. I go with anxiety. If you're not allowing this entire process to work through the way that it should work through, when you go to other people, you're going to live in this human level of, I can do all things. Okay, I'm talking myself up. I'm working it up. I'm working really hard. I've got my plan. I may have even written out my words. And now I've got all of these things going on in a way that I have confidence that I'm doing exactly what I need to do. And this should work out. And that other person, they better hear me. They better recognize the effort that I'm taking. All of the things that I'm talking about, I really put into that category of a belief that I can fix things. You can't. The only thing you can do is come with humility and offer the right language, offer the right attitude that says, what I did was wrong. You're looking at it, you're owning it, you're doing the right thing. And it may be received well, it may not be received well. That's not your job. Your job is to look in the mirror, do right judgment, see yourself, get ready to present yourself to the other person in the right way. You're not coming to fix things. You're just coming to be transparent. And this is who I am. This is what I did. It's right for me to share this with you. And I'm not requiring any specific response from you. I'm here just to express that, to own that. Here I am. When that's where we are, we open ourselves up into a place to where, wow, this whole personal inventory could actually work because I'm seeing me and I'm offering up with humility repentance. A final mistake that we make in this area of judgment is what I call lowering the expectations. So often it starts with ourselves where we're taking a look at it. Well, what do you expect? Look at everything I've been through. I've been through such a tough life. I had this happen to me or that happened to me. I got triggered. We use all kinds of language like that to excuse ourselves. And on the one hand, there's some truth to that. All that can reasonably be expected of you from others, and frankly, reasonably expected of you for yourself, is to take the next step. You're not going to be able to suddenly jump up and be mature and get it right and go where you need to go. So part of my inventory is to come to the other person and simply say, this is where I'm at on my growth chart. And because that's where I'm at, this is what I'm trying to do. These are the steps that I'm trying to take. I realize that it's coming out in a bad way on you. I'm sorry for that. What am I doing? I'm taking ownership. I'm not making excuses. I'm not trying to lower expectations in a way that all of a sudden I'm trying to get you to excuse me. No, I'm still taking full responsibility. I'm still seeing the entire picture of what it's going to take for me to get up to standard. But I'm not permanently lowering that expectation where this is who I am, and because this is who I am, you just need to accept me for who I am. That's a terrible mistake in this whole reconciliation process. It is reasonable for you to take a look at yourself and understand, with what I grew up with everything that I've been through, it's going to take me some work to get better. But notice what I said. There's this thing called the grace of God. The grace of God is available to every one of us. The grace of God will help us take the next step. You put together 5 steps, 10 steps, 15 steps. You don't need to stay where you are. Most people are able to handle it if you come to them admitting, this is where I am. It's going to take me a while to get to where I need to be. Most people, if you're honest, you're sincere, that heart level connection is real, they're able to work with that. But do you see that for yourself? Or are you in a place of victimhood or making excuses where you're taking that same thing and not forecasting that this is what it's going to take for me to get better, and it may take me a period of time, and I see some steps and I'm willing to take them, but instead it's just like, well, that's just who I am and you better get used to it. And many times we go into that place of lowering expectations. If that's what you're doing, good luck with that. It's not going to work out well. These 5 points cover some of the major mistakes that we often make when we're putting together an inventory or we're approaching another person with some kind of a plan toward reconciliation and restoration. If these have been happening, it's good for you to take a good look at that and to understand, and hopefully to be able to say, going forward, I'm going to edit these things out of my life. I want you to take a few moments, share where you've been, the efforts you've been making, or the lack of effort that you've had, because there is progress to be made, and then we'll continue with the what. For us to rightly see ourselves, we have to see the eternity in our heart's part. If I'm going to other people, they actually see me. I believe there's a powerful spiritual piece where we don't respond to other people exactly the same way. Why is it that when you go to one person, you respond one way? You go to the next person, you respond the next way, the next person, the next way. Part of it, of course, is that part where it's a different person. They're responding different. Of course, I respond different. But I do believe that there's an eternity in our hearts that is written there that interacts with that other person. And when I come across a person who I call a mercy person, I expect them to be merciful. If I come across a person who's harsh, and they're harsh to me, I don't expect them to be a mercy person. I judge them within the framework of that spiritual perception. The same thing is true if I'm working towards reconciliation and restoration. What's one of the big issues that comes up? That's not fair. You're holding me to a different standard. The first part in developing right judgment is just simply the statement, others will know your call. Others will know your creation. They will know who you are. They will not judge you, are you ready for that word, fairly. And then you will begin to complain, how come you're treating that person differently than you are treating me? In our culture, we're very much steeped in that word fairness, and we want everything to work out equal, and we want everything to work out to where I made this effort, you should recognize my effort. That's just not realistic. One of the most powerful things you can do in terms of right judgment is to begin to understand you are created in the image of God with certain specific traits. The people you're interacting with, they also are a unique creation of God. My interaction with that other person, it's going to be, again, absolutely unique. So I have to begin to approach this thing understanding, wow, other people see me from a different perspective than I may even see myself. And as soon as I'm in that life's not fair zone, it's not going to help me towards reconciliation or restoration. Sometimes I would encourage you to actually do just the opposite. If you're finding that people are challenging you in an area that's just not fair, I'd encourage you to look in the mirror and go, wow, other people are seeing something in me that I'm not seeing. God, what are you doing in my life? Is there a place here where I need to step up and get into a new plane? Is there a way where I can connect with you and with your grace and step into this place that the other people are seemingly getting offended toward me because I'm not walking there? I think many times if we would think about it from that perspective, it's not actually an insult, but it actually should be a compliment and even a challenge that, hey, we can do better, we can live better. A second part of right judgment is to move really from motives or excuses or anything that to simplicity, which is just, I did it. Sometimes it's helpful to come along and give people background understanding. Here's my situation. Here's what I've been through. Here's where my heart was. Here's where my attitude was. Not as an excuse, but as just a simple explanation. But ultimately, simpler is better. Clearer is better. And you just get to a simple, are you ready? This is what I did. I recognize what I did. I recognize that it was painful. I recognize the impact that it had on you. I am sorry for the impact that I had on you. I take ownership for the impact that I had on you. If you're listening to my language, again, just simplicity, short, clear, to the point, taking clean ownership. When we get it down to that level, that's really important. That's right judgment. I did this. It was wrong. I'm here to let you know that. No excuses. If you can get into that kind of clean, clear language, you're several steps ahead in this reconciliation process. I'm going to add the next point, which almost sounds like it contradicts the last one, but you need to see motives. And I'm not talking about the motives of the other person. I'm talking about your own motives. When there's selfishness there, when there's bitterness there, when there's insecurity there, when you're seeing that part that's under the water, that's that iceberg that's not seen, when you're seeing all of that, the other person already knows it. Many times people are like, well, I can't tell them that. That gives them an upper hand. They would have an advantage over me. If you're still worried about them getting an advantage, you're not in the right motive. You're not in the right place. So you do need the simplicity of, I did it, I was wrong. Then you also need the simplicity of, not only did I do the wrong thing, my motive was wrong. My heart was wrong. The problem with motives is that most of the time we think our own motives are good. So when we come with our inventory, we're trying to make up for what we did with our motives. If you're trying to make up for what you did by talking about a right motive and your right heart, just do yourself a favor and do the reconciliation process a favor. Can it? Drop it. But when your motive is not good and you're able to be honest about motive, it's going to ring with a new level of sincerity when you actually are able to come to the person and say, my heart was not right and my actions were not right. If you're trying to contrast the two to justify yourself, leave it off. But if you really are using it to get to a deeper level of transparency, it will make a positive difference in the reconciliation process. Another thing that adds to right judgment is what I call understanding the law of multiplication. Luke 6:38 tells us that when I give something out, it doesn't just come back to me, it comes back to me in multiplied form. That means that if I give out a little bit of sarcasm, I'm likely to get back a lot of sarcasm. When I get back a lot of sarcasm, I'm going to be angry because I just did a little and look at what you gave back to me. And now we're back to those famous words. That's not fair. In the idea of justice, what's equal back and forth. You owe me because I did a little bit and you gave me a lot back. Well, I'm sorry. Get a hold of the spiritual realm and realize that that's simply the way it works. If I give a little bit out, I'm going to get a multiplied amount back. When I understand that, I'm able to step back and begin to realize I set this thing in motion. I can't be angry at the other person for responding in a way that's very human and very normal. That's the way it works. I take ownership for me. I don't look at the entire picture and begin to throw darts at the other person because you responded back to me this way. That doesn't work. That's not your right. If you want to do reconciliation, you're looking in the mirror and you're saying, I did this. And finally, the absolute anchor of right judgment is humility. When I'm really in that place of humility, and hopefully you're able to look at your own heart and begin to discern this over a period of time. When I'm really in that place of humility, I think different, I feel different, I see different. The chances of me having right judgment just go radically up. If I'm in jealousy, envy, anger, bitterness, it's not fair, all of the other lists of things like that, if that's where my heart is, just stop, wait, go back to point number 1, 1 Corinthians 4:4, where I'm not ready to even do a personal inventory yet. Slow it down, get to that point of humility, wait for God to speak, start to see your own heart. Then when you see other people's reactions, you're like, oh, no wonder they responded that way. You're taking the appropriate ownership in the entire situation. When you really get to that point of humility, it does more for right judgment than maybe all of the other points combined. Again, to do an inventory, the what comes down to right judgment. There's wrong judgment. There's right judgment. When I begin to walk in right judgment, it really is powerful, and it can absolutely change your ability to do quality relationship, even with difficult people. When they're able to come at you and you're able to respond in a way that's blameless, and you're only going to do that with practice. When they're able to come at you and you're able to respond in a way that's blameless, you become powerful in your ability to walk in quality relationships. Wouldn't it feel good for you to know that you're somewhat unoffendable? You're able to walk in love. You're able to walk in forgiveness. When you can do that, you truly become powerful in relationship, in showing the love of Christ to others. Take a look at these areas and honestly evaluate, am I doing right judgment? We'll be back in just a moment to finish up the video. When it comes to reconciliation and restoration, there are many things that will derail the process. In this segment, we're going to be talking about some of those. And first of all, I want to talk about just some of the common defense mechanisms that we use. A popular one in our culture right now is the term gaslighting, which is really nothing more than a defense mechanism that you use where you project something onto someone else. You're looking at yourself and you're literally a lot of times taking what's going on in your heart and projecting it onto the other person and then using that to justify your behavior and your response. Other things that we use are control, we use shaming, we use minimizing, where we try to say, well, what I did wasn't that big a deal. We play different ego games. There's all kinds of different things we do to deflect and to push away and to not really do the what of this stage. And the what is that right judgment where I look at me, no excuses. I'm not going to blame anybody else. I'm not even going to blame my past. I'm going to look at what I did, how I did it. I'm going to give an accurate evaluation of this is where I am, this is what I did. And again, it is okay to understand that I had a bad past. So this is where I am. I can take the next step. You don't have to be down on yourself, but you do have to start with truth. A second common mistake is what I call an unwillingness or an inability to judge. I've run into so many different people who have horrible pasts. Their parents actually introduced them to drugs and did drugs with them and many times sexually molested them or even trafficked them. So often I find in those situations, because the parents actually created this attitude of loyalty, and it's wrong for you to put me down, and it's wrong for you to do anything that would hinder the family, where they're literally unwilling to judge. They don't look back and go, this was wrong. If you don't develop a biblical perspective, a biblical understanding, setting right at the center of the recovery process is right judgment, where I begin to hear the lies of Satan and I begin to say, no, Satan, you're a liar. I refuse to believe that anymore. If you can't look at parents and begin to judge, now stop. I'm not talking condemn. I'm not talking belittle. None of us are in a good place to judge. If your parents did that, who knows why they're doing that? Who knows what was done to them? Many times when we find out what was done to our parents or to others who hurt us, we begin to understand, oh, that's why that person did that. And no, I'm not equipped to make the big judgment, a condemning judgment, a how do they look before Christ on Judgment Day. I'm not equipped for any of that. But I am equipped to say what they did with me, what that person did with me was wrong. It was harmful. It was painful. It sent me in a bad direction. And then as I teach so clearly on the forgiveness process, once I've judged, then I have to recognize that I'm not equipped to hang on to that judgment. So now I'm going to transfer my right to judge to God. This is so important, and if you haven't studied any of the forgiveness materials, I encourage you to go back and to pick up that, because it's such an important concept. In order to walk through this process of a personal inventory, you will need to do right judgment. And there will be people around you that you're going to need to get a reality check and see, oh, this is what happened. And when you walk through that forgiveness process, now you'll be able to hear at a completely different level, see at a different level, think at a different level. Sometimes that's almost a prerequisite in order for you to be able to connect with God, hear from Him, and actually walk through this entire process the way you need to walk it through. The next one you might not have thought about, but you're not going to wake up and suddenly do this reconciliation process in the right way. In order for you to get better, you need to learn to receive correction as a lifestyle. When you finally begin to understand that, wow, I need this. I need feedback. I need people to see me. I need them to speak into my life. When that becomes who you are, now if I'm going to another person, I'm not assuming that my personal inventory is correct and right and that I've got it together. I'm coming. I'm laying out what I've seen. I'm getting ready to share with them. I'm going to invite them to speak back into my life. Now, with the hard people, if you're doing that and you don't have a lifestyle in that area, as soon as they speak back, it's going to kick you and you're going to squeal and you're going to be angry and how dare you respond that way, and it will completely derail the entire process. One of the most powerful things you can do in order to get you ready to do reconciliation is go to people who you do trust, who you know that they love you, that their motives are good, and learn to receive correction from them. When you really do learn to take correction, then when I get into a situation where my teeth are a little bit gritted because that other person doesn't have the right to speak that into my life, if I've learned to receive correction and I know that I need that and I want that because I want to become right before Christ and I want to grow up in maturity, and even if, so to speak, you haven't earned the right to speak that way to me, if I want to get better, why wouldn't I want to hear it? And so often when we're in the reconciliation process, that's not what we do, and that's not how we think. And it's like, I'm going to share with you my stuff, but don't you dare say anything back. If that's where you're going, again, eternity in our hearts, the other person will know that. They will know that you're there to even scores. They will know that you're there just to kind of level the field in your own heart, but you don't really want interaction. You don't really want honesty, and it will go south. If you really want to get better, learn to receive correction, period. The next point that's incredibly important is the goal. And the goal that you need to have is to genuinely see others. If you go to someone with humility, it's amazing so often that will actually provoke them to come back with humility themselves. And when they do that, now I actually get to see the other person. I now actually get to see eternity written in that person's heart. When I'm able to see that, when I'm able to ask questions, when I'm able to hear, when I'm able to affirm, the most powerful action you can ever do with any individual is to affirm eternity in that other person's heart. So if I'm going and it's all about a transaction, it's all about me walking through this one little piece, if that's your goal, in the end, you've come far short, and you will hit a level that's far less powerful than what could be. If you have a heart to see other people and you're walking through this reconciliation process and you're not just eager to get it over with because it's going to be painful, but you're really ready to see and to hear and to communicate, expose your things the way you need to, get to that place of humility, if that's your heartbeat, amazing things can come out of this reconciliation process. And finally, get rid of your master plan to fix you. You have to understand that you cannot see from A to Z. You don't know what you're doing. Yes, go ahead and do an inventory. Yes, begin to take a look at some of those things. It's helpful to have a map. I'm going to encourage you to have that map. I'm not saying don't do it. But what I am telling you is don't depend on that. Depend on the voice of God. Be malleable. Come in, again, the last point, with a listening ear, with an eye that's looking, with an eye that's watching. If you can actually lower the tension level and you can take that pressure off from you to fix yourself or to fix the other person or to make this thing right in a day, but you're simply just coming as a human being in humility. Again, it is so powerful when we walk this way. This video was entitled, What? For so many people, the what of reconciliation is a transaction. It's a process. I'm going to walk through this thing, like the person that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. If I start to do that and I'm afraid it's going to fail and it's not going to get where I need it to go somewhere in the process, I'm ready to drink all over again. But when I bring that pressure down, and my what is, I need to hear what God is saying. I need to see the things I need to repent for. I need to take the next step. I need to see other people. I need to start a process when we take the pressure off to complete it all in a few steps. When I do that, I'm walking in the grace of God in humility in a way that is incredibly powerful toward restoration. Put away the pressure, take the next step, and let's just see what God is going to do.